Welcome to Quality Time with MoreSteam. I am your host, Dan Swartout. Today, we have a great show for you because we are joined by engineer, podcaster, creative thinker, Shawn Washburn. I am going to use Shawn's own words to introduce himself. Right now, I'm looking at Shawn's LinkedIn page, and this is what he writes in the About section. A manufacturing engineer with over 25 years experience in manufacturing, from product to design to manufacturing improvements, well-versed in lean manufacturing concepts and looking for ways to eliminate waste in all of its forms. Well, those are exactly the kinds of things we like to talk about here at Quality Time with MoreSteam. And we're going to talk to Shawn about using those concepts, those lean principles and concepts, putting those principles and concepts in action to create a culture of operational excellence. It's a fun conversation. Shawn's a really fun, creative guy, and I think you're really going to enjoy what we have to talk about today. Before I talk to Shawn, I wanted to make you aware of something new at MoreSteam. On May 15th, Ryan Magnuson from Medtronic did a webinar with MoreSteam, harnessing process modeling for lean transformations. Really interesting webinar with a lot of great information. I will put a link to that in the show notes. I will also put a link to a related case study in the show notes. So go ahead and check those out at moresteam.com. And now my conversation with Shawn Washburn. We are lucky enough today to be joined by Shawn Washburn, who is a mechanical engineer, a practitioner of lean principles, concepts, continuous improvement, and also a renowned podcaster in his own right, host of the very well-received Engineering Your Business podcast, which there are 113 episodes available of the Engineering Your Business podcast. So I suggest you check that out. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dan. Great to be on here. Looking forward to our conversation.
I am looking forward to it as well. And I thought it'd be great to have you on the show because not only are you in the lean space, the continuous improvement space, but you're a podcaster. How did you start doing the Engineering Your Business podcast?
As an engineer, like I'm more on the creative side. I've always loved to write. Sometimes people ask me, why didn't I just go into go into writing? But I had like the math and science in me. And so I've loved engineering. But I've always loved to write. I had a blog for a number of years and just wrote about family stuff and all kinds of things. I started to realize that I listened to more podcasts than I read blogs because I could do it when I was mowing the grass or working on the house. So I'm like, well, maybe I should try that. So that launched the first one, which actually the podcast feed for Engineering Your Business has the first one that I had, which was Stories of Starters. That was like an interview podcast. And that kind of got me into it. Just people's stories, and that's why I love the interview. It's been a long time since I've done interviews, so this is great. And I just found Engineering Your Business was kind of also like a brain dump for me to take, little 5-minute chunks to take stuff from my engineering and manufacturing and, creativity side and put them out into episodes.
So we could find both podcasts. How would we find those podcasts if we're looking for them through a podcast service?
Yeah, you can look for Engineering Your Business, should show up. Or if you go to engineeringyourbusiness.com or I think ShawnWashburn.com, I've got some that I put.
You've got a lot of websites, Shawn.
I build websites too. That's another thing.
No kidding.
So yeah, so I built my own. So if you go to like ShawnWashburn.com, I think that's where the podcast resides.
Well, go ahead and check that out. Engineering Your Business. I will put a link to the Engineering Your Business podcast in the show notes, so please check that out. Lots of great information from Shawn. It's a pretty short form podcast. Usually episodes are around 10 minutes or so with some of your thoughts on business processes, how to succeed in business, leadership, some of those principles. Am I right?
Yeah. Yep.
When I was on your LinkedIn earlier, Shawn, right up the alley of what we do here on Quality Time with MoreSteam. So I appreciate you being on the show. First of all, I went to school with a lot of mechanical engineering majors. I know a lot of mechanical engineers, but I'm not exactly sure that I know what a mechanical engineer does. So can you explain exactly what it is a mechanical engineer does?
I'd say at a core, like this is maybe broader for engineering in general, but especially with mechanical is someone who asks questions. That's kind of all like what I feel like I do most of the time is ask questions about, with my case with manufacturing engineering, if a machine's down or there's a quality issue or something's not working the way it's supposed to, or I'm at my house and like the fridge is broken, like it's asking questions and trying to figure out, what's underneath that rock.
Like the 5 whys, for example.
The 5 whys, yes.
Have you ever had to get to the 6th why, Shawn?
Sometimes, yes, or the 7th or 8th, yes, and maybe you just stop. You have to put a cap on it. It's like you're playing a game to 5, and it's a win by 2. You cap it at 10, so maybe you cap it at 10 whys, and then you just feel like there's no solution to this.
So you went to college for mechanical engineering, and you've spent your entire career in mechanical engineering with, of course, writing and podcasting as well. Were you in college introduced to any of the lean principles, any of the concepts of continuous improvement? Was that something you learned in college?
No. Yeah. I didn't really encounter that until my second job. So I'm on my 4th place where I worked. But the second job was first place I heard any kind of lean concepts, and we had a lean coordinator and things like that. So I got a little bit of it there. But I'd say the bulk of it is really actually been where I'm at now. In the last 11 years, we've had a lot more opportunity. And I was a design engineer for the first, 15 years. And then I switched over to manufacturing engineering. So when I did that, I had a lot of those ideas and concepts, but was able to put them more into practice in day-to-day operations.
So you didn't have a formal education or formal training in lean concepts and lean principles. You were in the workplace, you were observing and witnessing these principles in action, and that's, you almost had an informal education?
Yeah, I think there's a mix. I mean, I definitely there wasn't any that I can remember. I apologize to any professors who did speak about lean, but I don't remember any of it from college, but there were definitely some, mini courses or things along the way where I worked. And I think that in combination with, putting into practice, the 5 whys and a lot of, the whole idea of eliminating waste. And you can see all of a sudden you put on these glasses where you start to see the waste show up. You never thought about, waiting for something being waste. And then all of a sudden you're starting to see it that way. So I think a lot of it is like getting little chunks of that and then being able to apply it day to day.
How do you use these concepts every day in your work? Because you look at perhaps starting a project and how you will use the concepts throughout the life cycle of a project. But every day, how do those concepts come into play for you in your position as a manufacturing engineer?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, some of my work is with processes and designing better processes, and other is, like say I go in some morning and the machine's down. So it's trying to, I feel like there's so many lean, there's the house and all these, all these terminologies and everything, and like Poka-Yoking things, and all of it's good. Some of it is good when you're designing things up front, because you want to put those things in place to eliminate any opportunities for someone to do it wrong.
Right.
And then others is like like with the 5 whys is just, I think one thing that goes along with a lot of it is the relational and communication side, because usually what'll happen is maybe a machine will be down and, there's fishbone diagrams, there's, A3s and all these different tools, but a lot of it is, okay, this person said that this is what happened, and there's a note left from someone else that this is what happened, and you can physically see what's going on right now. And so trying to gather up almost like a detective, you're using all these tools that are in your tool belt, and then you're just trying to figure out, ultimately you need to get the machine back running, but you also don't want it to happen again tomorrow. I think that's kind of the bulk of it.
You used a term just now, Poka-Yoke. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Poka-Yoke.
I've heard Poka-Yoke. I don't know. Poka-Yoke. I always say Poka-Yoke.
How would you, to somebody who is not familiar with the concept, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, and I'll apologize right now because I hate when people throw out terms and you don't know what it is and they don't explain it. So yeah, I apologize for that. But yeah, Poka-Yoke's like a really great one because it's basically, can you design an operation or a step in something where it's like almost physically impossible to do it wrong. So if there's some plate that's got two holes in it and one hole's closer to the edge than the other one and it has to go a certain way, can you put a pin underneath so that you put the hole over the pin, it only fit one way. So it just eliminates, alternatively you could have a picture that shows, oh, the short side goes this way. But if you have a pin there and you physically can't put it down wrong, then it can eliminate a lot of those opportunities. Or you have a sensor or something like that that's going to pick it up.
I could have really used something like that recently. I was mounting a television and I was wondering why the television was crooked. And then I looked that I had screwed in the mounts in the wrong way. So I could have really used a Poka-Yoke approach to that. So basically what that means is that somebody like me who has only hung a few TVs in my life, somebody like me who's definitely not an expert and maybe unfamiliar with the process, you make the process in such a way that I can't mess it up, right?
Right. Yeah, and at work that's a key because with in the last, especially the last several years when it's been so hard to find people, sometimes you're having to stretch people or move people around, and you're bringing someone new in. And when you bring a new person in, that's really where it tests your systems because you want to know, okay, Joe's been doing this for 10 years. So even though the documentation isn't totally correct, like Joe knows that this page is wrong. And so he does it the right way anyway. But you bring a new person in and that really tests out your systems because, if you have it Poka-Yoke, then they might have tried to do it, not on purpose, but they might have done it wrong, but there physically wasn't a way for them to, mix it up.
You were talking about processes a little bit earlier. If you are looking at a process for the very first time and you're looking to improve that process, what are your first steps as you're taking a look at that process to make that process better?
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, on the side of what we were just talking about, I would look at, I guess I would look at if it's a current process, what kind of issues are there with it now? Like, is there a lot of scrap or is there a lot of downtime? Or, one thing with lean is looking at wasted motion, so you can do this, they call it a spaghetti diagram, basically draw all these, spots, and then you kind of draw out all the ways that the person's moving. So I think you kind of it's like the current in lean, it's like called the current state, so that's your current state is like, it takes this long to do this, and you map through and where the parts are situated and everything. And then you try to I think one of the big things is to not shut off possible solutions. So sometimes, especially if you're close to the thing, you are in it day in and day out, you may just kind of jump to conclusions like, well, we can't do X because that's just not going to work. Instead, like starting with, like, let's say anything's possible and you can put these parts here and you can rotate this thing here. And then shoot things down if you need to. But I feel like that happens a lot if people like me, you've been doing it for a long time. That's why I love co-ops when they come in, because if they're working with me, I tell them, hey, just ask questions. Like, don't think any question's dumb. Don't, think questioning any of the way that we do things is bad, because you're coming in with fresh eyes and you may not know all the, lean terminology and manufacturing stuff, but you can look at this and say, like, well, why is that bin so far away where they got to reach over every time? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe it was that way 5 years ago when they moved something and no one ever, took time to reorganize and replan it out. So I think that's the key, is like looking at the standard current setup, what the issues are now. Sometimes there's ergonomic issues or other things too. Sometimes it's just, hey, we make 10 an hour and we want to make 12 an hour. How can we do that?
Right.
And then being open-minded enough to, like, consider that there's something that maybe you hadn't thought would work in the past, and now maybe it'll work and you can get there.
It's interesting you brought that up, because it reminded me of something that Peg Pennington had said in our very first episode. people get behind ideas more if it's a team idea as opposed to, somebody else's idea that you're implementing. And I think that gets to the point of people. I think people sometimes, I'm guilty of it. You do something a certain way because that's the way it goes. That's the way you've always done it. You write a certain sentence a certain way. Well, that's the way I wrote it. The sentence could be better. In another life, when I used to tour the country as a stand-up comedian, some advice that I heard at one time was people get so married to the way they tell a joke because that's the way I tell it. That's the way I wrote it. That's the way I've told it forever. You could still find a way to tell that joke better. And at the end, it's more important to tell the joke better, to do the thing better, to have the process better than to have it be the way you did it because you've always done it that way.
Yeah. That's why like relationships and even how we're wired is so crucial too with lean is like you really, if you can be not afraid to have your feelings hurt, like if this is like this thing, I designed this line and I'm really proud of it. Like there's one line that I put in a couple of years ago. And like, if a co-op came in and they're like, why didn't you have this flip, the other way? Like, I think there's part in all of us that's going to be a little bit like, ooh, like that kind of like hurt a little bit that someone
Right.
like poked at you. But if you really want to get things better, if everyone can just be open to those suggestions and those ideas, then I think it's way easier to get improvements on processes and layouts and stuff like that.
So you said you were not exposed to lean concepts in your first job as much as you were at later jobs, correct?
Yeah.
How would you say that? Because you just talked about teamwork in a lean environment. How would you say that when lean concepts and principles are being applied, how does that change the dynamics of a team and teamwork and leadership as opposed to maybe when you weren't as exposed to lean principles and concepts?
Well, I think one thing that's huge is like if the company as a whole is on board with it, because you could have pockets, you could have a company where you've got some people who are curious thinkers and they're trying to tinker and improve things. But if the company's like don't do that, then they eventually maybe they'll go somewhere else because they're like no one's listening to this and I've got good ideas. But when like where I'm at now, like there's been a really concerted effort to like insert these tools into the language and try to teach it. So like if I'm an operator, I'm on this machine, that when something happens and the machine's not working right, like I'm first thinking like I have that, try to have more curiosity. I'm thinking about why is it not working? And I know that I've got the backing of like the company as a whole is on board with this thing. So if you need, maybe if you need more training for people or whatever, they just went through where I work with, they just went through a huge training effort where they trained everyone. I mean, so office people had been trained in some and lean stuff, but they got everyone on the floor. And I think that's awesome. Cause otherwise it's like, I've got a playbook here and this person over here, like their playbook has one page, and so they're like, I don't know what that thing is that Poka-Yoke. I don't know what that means. So when everyone has the same, and some people will hear the stuff and they're like, okay, that's great. Other people hear it and it like reaches them somehow because they are more curious and they're like, oh, wow, like they want to learn more. And so they'll really soak that in and you'll see that play out. But I think what the biggest difference I've seen is when the company from leadership down is like on board with this and like, hey, this is important. That you're not just like some lone ranger out there trying to fix things. You're, everyone's together on it.
You were talking earlier about processes, and I asked you about if you were to look at a process, what were your first steps? In a similar fashion, if you're looking to create an entirely new process, what are some of your first steps in doing that?
Yeah, that's a good, I mean, there's a lot to consider because you got to see, do you have floor space? In our case, like, do we have floor space in the plant? What's going to be required? Could we have floor space to do everything ourselves, or will we need to maybe outsource something? are we going to make our own equipment, or are we going to outsource some of that? And then looking at, like let's say everything's in place and you've got 4 machines that all kind of go in a row. What's the flow going to look like? How many people are going to be involved there? I think upstream, you're looking at what does the customer need? How many parts a year are they looking to make? That's a huge one because we have a stamping department, and if the customer only needs, I'll just throw it, let's say they need 100 parts a year, you're going to get this kind of a tool that's a single hit tool. But if they need, 1,000,000, you're going to get a totally different tool. So that a lot of that determines how you lay it out. And then you're looking at, on another front, you're looking at like safety is our top priority. So making sure not only the machines themselves have all the safety devices, but there's nothing ergonomically. You're not asking someone to like pick up some 75-pound thing and carry it over here, and or distance that you're traveling. And then you got to get the power down there. You got, all the equipment and stuff like that. You got to be able to work on things, so you can't jam stuff in together so tight that maybe the operator can work on it, but if maintenance needs to get in there, they can't. So a lot of that, thankfully, when you have a team where people have experienced, this guy's put in this line before over here, you're hopefully drawing from all that information, so you're not trying to start from scratch, each time you put something together.
I'm going to quickly interrupt the conversation before I ask Shawn my next question to tell you that the acronym downtime stands for defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized resources, transportation, inventory, motion, and excessive processing. Now back to the conversation. In your LinkedIn bio, it said you are looking to eliminate waste in all its forms. When you're looking at something and your goal as you're looking at it is to eliminate waste, what are some of the biggest red flags? What are the things that immediately jump out to you as, oh, there is a source of the waste?
I mean, it's funny. So there's like I never remember all 8, but there's like an acronym downtime.
Yes.
For like the 8 wastes. One that's not on there that I want to like add somehow, but I'm not sure how to respell it is miscommunication, because I feel like that could probably fit into one of them. I haven't figured out which one, but I feel like miscommunication sometimes is such a huge one, because I see that happen all the time. A lot of scrap or a lot of defects or things because either someone, like there's certain phrases, like if I hear certain phrases in an email or communication, like, well, they should have known whatever, or, they've always this, or that, like those things are red flags to know, hey, maybe there's some gap in communication that one person knows, but the other person doesn't. I love the tools. I love that the 8 forms of waste, because there's like defects, and waiting is one that I never would have thought of before. I think that's a really hidden one that maybe it's it's communication, email communication, and you're sending something, you're waiting for this person, and you don't know. I know in Lean there's a thing called a value stream map, and you try to visually map out like how long things take to happen and what communication looks like. And when you do it that way, all of a sudden you realize like, oh wow, like this could take 5 minutes, but it took like an hour because this is set up weird. I know Lean is big on visual, and I think that's another one too. Is I love this example, but there's a gate at work, and you put a key in to open this gate, and I don't know how long ago, but someone drew a little arrow to show which direction the key should go.
Yeah.
And I think it's like one of the best examples of Lean type of thinking, because you're not having to think every time. I mean, even if I open that gate a million times, I don't remember, but I see that arrow, and that just saved me, this amount of time. So yeah, I don't know. That answered your question,
no,
but
that's great. So there was some unknown, maybe unknowing Lean practitioner who did that has saved all that time for all the people at your work.
Yes. Yep.
Now, Shawn, do you use these principles in your non-work life? Do you eliminate waste in your house? When I talk to certain Lean practitioners, people who know these concepts and principles, I always get a kick of how they use these concepts in a non-work setting. Is there anything like that for you?
Yeah, I definitely think it comes into play when it comes to, maybe more spatial stuff,
Uh-huh.
how you have things laid out in your house. I've seen yeah, I've seen some videos of people, the way that they load their dishwasher, or how they have, anything that you can eliminate a step. I've heard about, like, even decision fatigue. Like you make so many decisions. I've never even thought about how many decisions you make a day, but I think that's a leaning thing where you can, if you can eliminate that you even have to decide X, or you put something closer. Like, I did this recently with my kitchen. I rearranged all my cabinets because I realized, like, when I first put stuff in there, I put things a certain way, but I'm like, I use this way more than this. So it's like, why waste all this time? And then of course, it took me a week to not reach into the wrong cabinet because that's where it had been forever. But yeah, it definitely trickles over as far as maybe on the visual or the communication side. Definitely on the whys, and trying to ask, like, because the 5 whys is all about just like, it's kind of like, I wrote a blog post about this years ago. I felt like toddlers are some of the best problem solvers because they haven't had the asking why thing like beaten out of them yet. Like,
Mhm.
as you get older, you like stop asking why, but like kids, like, that's what they're best at. Like, you tell them and then they ask why that, and they keep asking why. It's like, I think it originated with them.
Because I
Um,
said so, that's why. That's when
yes,
you get to the fifth why. That's when you
that's
get to the fifth
that's the
why.
fifth. Yeah, yep.
Shawn, as I look at your career, you went to college for mechanical engineering. You've spent your whole career in the engineering field. You hear so many stories of, I went to college and I never used that. Did you know that engineering was it for you from the jump?
I didn't know for sure. Looking back, I think if someone had put it more in terms of, not so much like, oh, do you like math and science, but more like, hey, are you a creative or a curious person? Like, yeah, I'm very curious about things. So I don't think that it was something that for sure I was like, oh, I really want to be an engineer, but it's really worked out. It's like been a good fit.
I'm glad you mentioned creativity because as I've been exposed to lean principles and concepts, creativity and creative thinking is really a big part of it. But you don't necessarily think of these processes as being creative. You think of it as a process. But to really maximize the process, you have to be creative. Could you speak to that a little bit?
I think the creative side, curiosity and creativity, I think, are two things that are, like when we talk to high school students that come in, being willing to, yeah, be curious, ask questions, but then on the creative side, part of it is like we talked about before, like not shutting down, like being able to, like, assume that anything is possible. And I think some of the best ideas come from that. A lot of it's with, on the floor, and what we talked about before too, when the whole company is, I don't like there's some terms I don't like because but the lean journey, when we're on the lean journey,
Uh-huh.
but when people know that they have a freedom to bring up ideas and that those ideas are going to go somewhere, then, it's amazing what ideas they come up with, like, where you're like, oh, wow, I never thought to do it that way, or I didn't even know that was a problem. And they're like, oh, and if they've already got a solution, that's even better. Some people are great at coming up with like complaining about things, but they should, if the person's also like, hey, I've been thinking about this, could we do this thing over here? And they already have an idea. Yeah, that's amazing. So, like, for me, I'm also a really visual guy. So when I first started work where I'm at, one of the things was there wasn't a lot of visual. I don't know. I do a lot that's visual with, like, laying out like all these different parts or how these processes go together. And for me, that was kind of my creative side coming through my engineering. And I like that when people like you're a stand-up comic, right? Who's got a legal background. Like I love when the whole part of them is all like there. They don't have to like shut it off, So I'm not like going in there and be like, okay, I got to just do analytical engineering stuff. The creative side is a really important part of it.
Thanks, Shawn. One day I'll find a more creative way to introduce this brief message. MoreSteam is the leading global provider of online training, certifications, and technology for Lean Six Sigma. We work with individuals, universities, and businesses, large and small, to provide proven solutions that are right for them. From interactive training to process improvement software, we are here to help you work as efficiently and effectively as possible. Visit moresteam.com to learn more. Obviously, Shawn, you are a creative person, blogs, podcasts. What other hobbies do you have? And do you have any other creative hobbies?
Yeah, I love to play guitar, acoustic guitar.
How long
I
have
love
you been
sports.
playing?
20 some years, probably since college.
If you were to break out a guitar right now and play your best song, what would it be?
My best song?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been learning Wanted Dead or Alive. That's one I've been playing a lot.
Bon
So,
Jovi?
yeah, yep.
Oh, I bet that's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't have a 12 string. It's only a 12 string. I just have a 6 string, but yeah, it's amazing. YouTube's amazing because, I mean, you have to be able to know how to do and pull off certain things, but to watch a video and then 5 minutes later be like, oh, something that was totally mysterious to you before, and you already have the tools to be able to like play it. You just don't know how it goes. And then you watch it and then, yeah, that's pretty cool.
You know how badly I want to say right now, Shawn, that Shawn Washburn has seen a million faces and rocked them all. I want to say that really badly. You've seen a
Yeah.
million problems and you've solved them all.
I hope. Yeah.
I want to see only inspired lyrics. Shawn, why do you think you've had so much success in your career? Obviously, you've grown in your career. You've been in your field for a long time, assumed leadership positions. What do you attribute a lot of your success to?
I think one thing that's really important for longevity in a company is like to be real and to be approachable and be, I'm naturally wired relationally, but I think that's a huge part of like, if you're going to be a team player, like I not only do I, I mean, I respect everyone I work with, but I want to know more about them. Like, so, when I go into a place, I feel like if God leads me to when he led me to where I'm at now, I feel like it's more, I'm there more than to just like lay out production lines and solve problems. Like I'm working with people every day that I'm trying to build relationships with. And it's amazing. Like, and you're in the middle of banging your head against the machine because it won't work. And then an hour later, you just happen to have a chance conversation with someone about something deep going on in their life. Like that's what energizes me.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like I do the engineering so I can be around for what's going on in people's lives. So I don't know. Like I think the curiosity thing is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about curiosity is like you don't have to be born curious. You can become more curious. You can ask better questions. But like if you're like these high school students that come in, if some of them are like, I really don't know what I'm going to do after high school. I'm like, that's great. Like at least just ask questions. And you've never had more access to YouTube videos and resources that can show you anything you really want to know. So if you're curious, it's almost like if you're like a hunger. If you're hungry, you're going to look for food. If you're curious, you're going to look for like why do things work the way they do. So I think being curious, caring about people, hopefully are some of the things that have been helpful along the way.
Shawn, great conversation. Thank you so much for joining the show. Anything that we have not yet touched upon that you'd like to mention?
Like one thing that gets me excited with, say with Lean is I can think of some colleagues that I work with that I've seen it work both ways. I've seen Lean where the company's going to have people come up with ideas and then stuff doesn't, pan out or no one listens. And then they kind of like shut down. I talked to a guy years ago and I was like, hey, do you have any ideas on how to improve this? And he's like, well, I do. Like, you ever told them to anyone? He's like, well, I did a long time ago and no one listened. And so he just like, it made me sad because he's bottled this stuff, for years, he just bottled up all this stuff inside. So when there's an atmosphere where you can ask the questions and communicate clearly and where people feel like they can, there's one woman I work with and she's like, I'd show her why a machine gave her a certain error, and I showed her, how to fix it or clean something, and then the next time when I went out the next time, and she already walked me through, like she had taken that information and she was like hungry to like learn more stuff. That's pretty cool like that. So, yeah, I think the one thing I like about Lean too is it applies anywhere. So, I mean, I'm in manufacturing, but like you mentioned about things in your own house, or, I mean, I might be, if I'm out and about, I think that's probably where it comes into play more, is if there's a process that's set up somewhere. Like my daughter plays volleyball, and like the first meet we were at, they were like taking cash and making people wait forever to get, it was like, I so wanted to go to the front of the line and like reorganize the layout for the process. Like, so, and a friend and I did that one time we had a fundraiser for a youth group. We used to work with a youth group, and we were doing a sub like assembly line, and we did that. We were like, hey, can you let us take one of these lines and we'll redo it, because he was a manufacturing guy. So I feel like there's so many concepts that apply in life and can make things so much better.
When you were exposed to these principles, like you said, you see them everywhere. I remember when I was in 5th grade, we did a production of the HMS Pinafore by Gilbert and Sullivan. And I had never heard of Gilbert and Sullivan in the 5th grade. But after we did that production, I saw them everywhere and the references to them everywhere. I think it's kind of like that with Lean principles. You see them everywhere once you become aware of them.
Yeah, that's very true.
Shawn Washburn, this has been such an outstanding conversation. Thank you so much for joining the show. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot. Great show. Thank you so much, Shawn.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's been great having a conversation.
Thanks again, Shawn. And thank you for listening to Quality Time with MoreSteam. You can email the show at qualitytime@moresteam.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast service. Also, please go ahead and visit our website, moresteam.com, to learn about the software and tools that can help you solve problems, eliminate waste, and do things better. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more Quality Time with MoreSteam. Thanks again.